Space, 1999. Once set the screens of the 1970s on fire with its journeys beyond the universe, but behind that shining glory were real-life stories soaked in tears. The actors who brought this show to life lived on the thin line between triumph and tragedy, painful divorces, the loss of loved ones, and fierce battles with illness. What really happened? Let's explore the story behind it and pay tribute to the legacies they left behind. Martin Landau as Commander John Koenig. Martin James Landau was born on June 20, 1928, in Brooklyn, New York. When he was 47 years old, he took on the role of Commander John Koenig of Moonbase Alpha in space, 1999, 1975 to 1977. Landau brought to life an image of a steel-nerved, brave leader unafraid to sacrifice himself to protect the crew from horrifying dangers beyond space. This role turned him into an immortal icon of science fiction. But when the cameras stopped rolling, Landau's life fell into a spiral of pain. The marriage that seemed eternal with Barbara Bain, his co-star and loyal companion, collapsed in 1993 after 36 years together, sweeping away so many memories of a home that once seemed irreplaceable. That divorce was like a deadly blow, leaving Landau facing loneliness in his twilight years, as even his two grown daughters could not fill the emotional void. His loneliness was compounded by having to watch colleagues, friends who had accompanied him through so many years, pass away one by one. Each funeral cut another wound into Landau's heart, plunging him into a state of despair, regret, and haunting memories of his glorious past. And then, heart disease, a weakened body, and sudden emergency hospital visits became the ghosts lingering around his life, like a curse he could never shake. On July 15, 2017, Martin Landau passed away at Ronald Reagan UCLA Medical Center, aged 89. From internal bleeding leading to hypovolemic shock combined with chronic heart disease. His body rests at Beth David Cemetery in Elmont, New York. The estimated net worth of about 10 million USD that Landau had built over his lifetime seemed hardly enough to make up for the losses he had endured. Barry Morse as Professor Victor Bergman. Barry Morse, full name Herbert Morse, was born on June 10, 1918 in London. When he was 57 years old, he played Professor Victor Bergman in the first season of Space, 1999, 1975 to 1976. Victor Bergman was the senior scientist who brought knowledge and calm to solve the crises threatening Moonbase Alpha on the Moon. Bergman's character, both wise and compassionate, became deeply engraved in the hearts of science fiction fans of the 1970s. Off-screen, Morse's life was stained with tragedy when he had to watch his wife, actress Sidney Sturgis, pass away in 1999 after 14 years battling Parkinson's disease. The pain of losing a life partner of more than 6 decades devastated him, plunging him into a long depression and nearly destroying his will to live. Though he continued to perform on stage, his spirit bore a wound that could not easily heal, leaving his later years covered in the shadows of loneliness. Alongside that sorrow, Morse also faced increasingly severe health problems. His long-term smoking habits contributed to worsening heart conditions, leaving him frequently fatigued, hospitalized, and suffering through prolonged pain. Even though he had once been one of the most passionate artists, he gradually became exhausted by his declining health, while memories of losing his wife haunted him night after night, carving deeper into his emotional void. On February 2, 2008, Barry Morse took his last breath at University College Hospital, London, at the age of 89. His body was donated to medical science, and his ashes were later scattered at St. James's Square Garden, Pall Mall, in 2011. His estimated net worth of about 3 million USD, although modest compared to a glorious 7-decade career, still preserves a precious legacy: the image of a courageous professor in space and a heart that once loved deeply but had endured to the very end in real life. Zienia Merton as Sandra Benes. Zienia Merton was born on December 11, 1945, in Myanmar. When she was 29 years old, she took on the role of Sandra Benes in the series Space, 1999, 1975 to 1977. In this series, she played the female data officer, holding an important role in coordinating survival missions at Moonbase Alpha. The strong yet deeply emotional image of Sandra Benes made Merton one of the most memorable faces of 1970s science fiction. Yet her real life was far from peaceful. Merton was diagnosed with late-stage cancer in 2017, a devastating blow that came while she still burned with the desire to contribute. In her final years, she had to endure exhausting rounds of treatment, mixed with loneliness as many of her close colleagues had passed away before her, leaving emotional gaps that were hard to fill. The pressures of a harsh acting industry also left her health and spirit increasingly fragile. On September 14, 2018, Zienia Merton passed away at the age of 72 after a period of battling cancer, closing the chapter on a lifetime of dedication. She left behind an estimated net worth of about 1.5 million USD, enough to testify to her resilience and a career that spanned more than half a century. Tony Anhalt as Tony Verdeschi. Anthony Anhalt was born on January 19, 1941, in Singapore. When he was 34 years old, he played Chief of Security Tony Verdeschi in the second season of the science fiction series Space, 1999, 1976 to 1977. This character was built as a strong, determined, and courageous pillar, playing the role of maintaining security for the entire Moonbase Alpha amid countless dangers in outer space. It was also the role that helped cement his name in the hearts of science fiction fans. Yet Anhalt's real life was filled with misfortune. He went through 2 failed marriages, leaving behind emotional wounds that were hard to mend. After Space, 1999, his career became shaky, combined with the pressure of raising his son in the entertainment industry, pushing Anhalt into states of instability more than once. The loss of a close colleague and friend made his heart even more closed off and lonely. On top of that, he had to face a cruel liver cancer that drained his strength day by day. Many sources said Anhalt had a long-term smoking habit, which might have worsened his illness. In his final years, the pain tormented him both physically and mentally, turning a screen hero into an exhausted man, clinging to the last remnants of fame to fight against a harsh fate. On July 26, 2002, Anthony Anhalt took his final breath in London at the age of 61, closing a journey full of upheavals and losses. He left behind an estimated net worth of about 1.2 million USD. Not large, but the result of a lifetime dedicated to television. Stuart Damon as Guido Verdeschi. Stuart Damon was born on February 5, 1937, in Brooklyn, New York. When he was 38 years old, he appeared as Guido Verdeschi in Space, 1999, 1975 to 1977. A security officer assisting Chief Tony Verdeschi in coordinating the protection missions of Moonbase Alpha. This character was portrayed as an experienced, brave man, willing to sacrifice himself to ensure the crew's safety against threats from outer space. But behind what seemed like a glorious career, Damon carried deep wounds from his childhood after losing his father early, a trauma that left a mark on his soul for decades. In addition, his marriage to an actress whose name was not disclosed also fell apart, leaving a painful cut to his spirit that made him quiet and withdrawn. The harsh professional pressures of Hollywood, along with worries about aging, pushed Damon into a spiral of chronic anxiety. In his later years, Stuart Damon had to face the cruel disease of kidney failure, forcing him to move into a retirement community for film workers, where loneliness became even more evident after his wife, Deirdre Ann Ottewill, died of Alzheimer's in 2019. During this period, Damon still tried to remain optimistic, but his health continued to deteriorate, forcing him to leave the stage lights that had fueled his passion for 6 decades. On June 29, 2021, Stuart Damon took his final breath in Woodland Hills, Los Angeles, at the age of 84. His estimated net worth was around $5 million USD, the result of decades of tireless dedication. Christopher Lee as Captain Xantor. Sir Christopher Frank Carandini Lee was born on May 27, 1922, in London. When he was 53 years old, he took on the role of Captain Xantor in an episode of Space, 1999, 1975 to 1977. The image of a cold but dignified alien commander, combined with Lee's deep, steel-like voice, turned this brief role into a remarkable highlight of his already massive career, alongside Dracula, Saruman, or Count Dooku, characters immortalized in the world's cinematic memory. But behind the spotlight, Christopher Lee's personal life also went through many ups and downs. At the end of the 1950s, he was once engaged to Countess Henriette von Rosen, a deeply romantic relationship that faced fierce opposition from her family to the point that her father hired a private detective to monitor him, demanded to meet all of Lee's friends for screening, and required Lee to ask the King of Sweden for permission before marrying. In the end, Lee voluntarily canceled the engagement, feeling he was not financially secure enough to give Henriette a worthy future. That decision left a lingering scar in him, as he was still stepping into an acting career that remained unstable and harsh. Fortunately, in 1960, he met Birgit Krunke, a Danish painter and former model, and they married in 1961, having a daughter named Christina. His love with Birgit helped Lee regain faith in family, although he still had to endure the loss of many close colleagues in the British horror scene who passed away one after another, as well as his own declining health. His decades-long smoking habit in his youth sowed the seeds for heart disease and respiratory failure, making him struggle with painful complications in old age. On June 7, 2015, Christopher Lee passed away at Chelsea and Westminster Hospital at the age of 93 from heart failure and respiratory complications. His net worth of around 25 million USD could not fully express the legacy he left behind. Peter Cushing as Ron. Peter Wilton Cushing was born on May 26, 1913, in Surrey. When he was 63 years old, he played Ron, a wise alien philosopher, in an episode of Space 1999 in 1976. Even with such a brief but profound role, he still confirmed the dignified presence of a horror film icon. Peter Cushing's personal life, however, was a wound that never healed. He married Violet Helen Beck in 1943, a woman he loved so much that he called her "my whole world." For nearly 3 decades, Helen was not only his wife, but also his spiritual anchor, companion, and the one who listened to every worry throughout his turbulent acting career. But tragedy struck when Helen died in 1971 from emphysema, leaving Cushing with what felt like no reason to live. He confessed that he had been so desperate he ran up and down the stairs, hoping a heart attack would take him away to reunite with his wife. Although he did not die, Cushing still said his heart died with Helen, and that the years after were merely killing time. He sank into the obsession of loneliness, never remarried, and many friends recalled that he would often cry when mentioning his wife. Once a man who lived simply after that loss, Cushing's health also declined, with severe weight loss that forced the script of Dracula AD 1972 to be rewritten so that his character would become a grandfather instead of a father, due to his withered appearance. Peter Cushing took his final breath on August 11, 1994, at Pilgrim's Hospice, at the age of 81, after many years fighting prostate cancer and the exhaustion of aging. His estimated net worth was around 5 million USD. Though large, it could never fill the emptiness left by the wife he had so dearly loved. Leo McKern as companion Gwent. Leo McKern was born on March 16, 1920. At the age of 56, he appeared in Space 1999 as guest star companion Gwent, a mysterious and powerful character who made a brief but impressive appearance, exactly in line with the seasoned presence McKern had shown through hundreds of stage and television roles. His life had gone through a huge shock when he was just 15 years old, after an accident in a factory forced him to have one eye removed, leaving him with a glass eye for the rest of his life, as a bitter reminder of fate. Yet that tragedy did not stop McKern from pursuing an acting dream. He fell in love and married actress Jane Holland in 1946, a strong relationship that lasted for more than half a century. Jane became his steadfast spiritual support, helping him overcome insecurity about his appearance and the stage fright that constantly lurked. From this marriage, they had 2 daughters, among whom Abigail followed in his footsteps and once acted alongside him in the series Rumpole of the Bailey, where McKern became an icon through the role of the wise but deeply contemplative lawyer Rumpole. The final years of McKern's life were truly harsh, as he suffered from memory loss caused by Alzheimer's, a disease that left the artist, who once knew his lines down to every comma, helplessly watching his memories fall apart piece by piece. The pain of losing co-stars, combined with a constant smoldering loneliness, gradually wore down his spirit. Although he was not heavily addicted to alcohol, he still turned to a glass to ease the long nights. Even so, he maintained the respect of audiences with the image of a devoted artist who bravely overcame insecurity and misfortune. On July 23, 2002, Leo McKern took his last breath at a nursing home near Bath, England, at the age of 82. His ashes were cremated at Haycombe Cemetery, closing the life of a cinematic monument with an estimated net worth of around $3 million USD, mostly accumulated from decades of acting and advertising work. Though he now rests in peace, McKern is still remembered by later generations as the one who gave a soul to companion Gwent and Rumpole with a heart that had been broken many times but had never run out of dedication. After a knee injury during adolescence, then pouring all his passion into film and baseball. Bing Russell was never afraid to break the rules. The clearest proof was owning the Portland Mavericks baseball team, where he boldly rejected all commercial sponsorships and opened the gates for any player to come try out. It was a rebellious spirit, almost defiant of the entertainment machine that he believed silenced actors like himself. He bitterly admitted he had been blacklisted by Hollywood for his opposing political views since the 1950s, and he carried lifelong regret over never getting a worthy lead role. In his final years, Bing lived almost reclusively, surrounded only by old film reels and baseball memorabilia, searching for the memories of past glories. Bing Russell died on April 8, 2003 in Thousand Oaks, California, at 76 years old after a battle with cancer. His body was cremated, and the ashes were returned to the family to be kept alongside the Portland Mavericks baseball artifacts. Bing's assets at the time of death were estimated at about $2 million USD, mainly from film royalties and ownership of valuable baseball archives. Phil Chambers as Abe. Horace Phillip. Phil Chambers was born on June 16, 1916 in Los Angeles, California. When he stepped onto the screen as Abe in Bonanza in 1962, he was 46 years old. Although only appearing as a supporting character, Phil Chambers still impressed viewers with the image of a diligent, quiet, and kind-hearted Western townsman, serving as a solid backdrop for the main storylines to shine. His career was largely tied to similar roles, portraying the working-class people of old America. But behind the camera, Phil Chambers' life was far from peaceful. Growing up in a poor family in Los Angeles, with a father who abandoned them when he was still a child, young Phil had to witness his mother exhausting herself as a janitor to feed her children. His alcoholic and abusive stepfather pushed Phil into a childhood full of fear, making him cautious and slow to trust others. After World War II, where he had served and brought home many psychological scars, Chambers refused all help and buried his war trauma deep inside. This unintentionally led to unpredictable fits of anger, which ended up destroying his marriage to actress Hella McKay, who could no longer tolerate his coldness and indifference. Phil Chambers played more than 115 roles throughout his career, but he never truly escaped the shadow of supporting characters. He often fiercely argued with casting directors, claiming many scripts were nonsense and cheap, and his withdrawn, defiant attitude gradually pushed him to the sidelines of Hollywood. In his final years, Chambers lived alone in a small, rented apartment, distanced from both colleagues and fans. There were whispers of an unacknowledged child, and even rumors of a secret same-sex relationship, but no one ever confirmed them, and he never spoke out. Phil Chambers took his last breath on January 16, 1993 in Los Angeles at 76 years old. His estate was estimated at under $1 million USD, mostly consisting of a small savings account and some film royalties. Robert Fulk as Deputy Sheriff Clem and Seth. Robert Castleberry Fulk was born on May 5, 1908 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He joined the world of Bonanza in 1960 when he was 52 years old, playing Deputy Sheriff Clem and Seth, the image of a wise, calm, and somewhat stern sheriff. He was remembered by audiences as a trusted face of the West, helping to maintain order amid gunfights and chaos. Robert Fulk's steady yet powerful presence etched itself into fans' hearts, even though he was only a modest link in Bonanza's large cast. Yet behind the spotlight, Robert Fulk's life was a journey of contradictions. Coming from a strict family with a father who considered emotions a weakness and constantly imposed his will, Fulk grew up with a suppressed, guarded mindset and lacked trust in others. He once had a taste of Broadway and worked with the legendary director George Abbott, but he never got a leading role, a deep wound that he carried throughout his career. It was said that he often criticized colleagues, especially actors from the method acting school, which caused many Hollywood producers to distance themselves from him. That he carried throughout his career. It was said that he often criticized colleagues, especially actors from the method acting school, which caused many to distance themselves. His marriage to actress Barbara Slater, his second wife, was said to be more functional than loving, a sort of unspoken contract to maintain the image of a perfect family in a conservative industry. Robert had a daughter, but there were constant rumors about his private life, even hinting at unspoken sexual orientations that surrounded him. Fulk often tried to escape the pressures of Hollywood by returning to architecture and designing houses as a way to heal and find himself again, but he never fully broke free from the shadow of depression. Robert Fulk died on February 25, 1989, in Los Angeles, at 80 years old, from chronic heart disease that he had neglected while busy acting. He was buried at Green Hills Memorial Park in Rancho Palos Verdes, in the quiet reflection garden, without any grand memorial, true to the reserved nature he had kept throughout his life. His assets at the time of death were estimated at about $2 million USD, mainly from real estate, architectural projects, and film royalties. Lane Bradford as Buck and Charlie. Lane Bradford, whose real name was John Mertland LeVar Jr., was born on August 29, 1922, in Philadelphia. He joined Bonanza in 1959 when he was 37 years old, taking on villainous roles like Buck or Charlie, outlaws who were ruthless yet irresistibly captivating for audiences. With his steely gaze and rugged build, Lane Bradford made any episode he appeared in tense and filled with the scent of gunpowder. But in real life, Bradford carried a darkness no less grim than his on-screen characters. As the son of actor John Merton, he grew up in a cold household, emotionally abused by his father and pressured to follow in his footsteps in show business. Lane became rebellious, eager to prove himself, and willingly performed his own stunts to the point that, in 1961, an on-set accident left him with a serious spinal injury. Suffering from chronic pain, he turned to painkillers and eventually became addicted to barbiturates. Bradford's life spiraled further downward when, in 1968, he sued Universal Studios for wrongful termination, but the case failed and left him virtually blacklisted from Hollywood contracts. Bradford's private life was equally turbulent. 2 marriages, first to Nancy Gray and then to Claire Larkin, both ended bitterly with accusations of violence and infidelity. In his later years, he tried to revive his career with an independent film project, but it failed disastrously. Relatives recalled that in 1972, Bradford was hospitalized for exhaustion, which was actually a mental breakdown as he tried in vain to quit sleeping pills. Lane Bradford died on June 6, 1973, in Honolulu, at 50 years old, from a brain hemorrhage after a stroke in the hotel room where he had been negotiating a comeback project. His body was cremated in Hawaii as per his wishes, closing the chapter on a life full of ups and downs, of a man passionate about film but ultimately devoured by Hollywood itself. His estate was estimated at only about $1 million USD, but most of it had been consumed by medical debts and legal fees. Roy Engel as Dr. Paul Martin. Roy Engel, born Leroy Englewood Stultz Jr., came into the world on September 13, 1913 in Missouri. He stepped into Bonanza in 1959 when he was 46 years old, portraying Dr. Paul Martin, a dedicated, calm doctor always ready to help the Cartwright family through illnesses and injuries. Engel's image in a white doctor's coat, with kind eyes, became a familiar sight to audiences throughout many seasons. But beyond the screen, Roy Engel's life was filled with uncertainty. Born during the chaotic era of the Great Depression, abandoned by his father, and raised by a mother who struggled to provide, Engel learned from a young age to swallow his tears and hide his sadness behind a composed exterior. Even though he once made a mark on radio with Sky King, he was bitter after the leading role was pulled from him at the last minute, pushing Engel to be typecast in supporting roles in the eyes of film studios. Behind the scenes, Engel often quietly drank in his trailer, whispering complaints about Hollywood, which he saw as only exploiting second-tier actors like him. Roy Engel's marriage was no smoother. His wife, a beautiful former dancer, grew weary of moving from film set to film set, and eventually left him in the late 1960s, taking their daughter Royan with her. From then on, Engel lived almost alone, comforted only by an old radio and backstage photographs. On winter nights, he would often sit alone, sipping alcohol, reminiscing about his glorious youth. Roy Engel died on December 29, 1980, at St. Joseph's Hospital in Burbank, at 67 years old, from complications of meningitis after a prolonged cold. It was estimated that Roy Engel's estate. The tragedies of the Bonanza stars are not only stories of fame, but also reminders of the price of the spotlight. From addiction, scandals, to haunting deaths, they left behind legacies that were both dazzling and sorrowful. Who do you think might be the next star with a tragic fate? Share your thoughts and keep exploring the unexpected stories of Hollywood.